I saw the caribou in the distance, and we slowly made our way closer. I noticed an enormous rack sticking up from a snowdrift and wondered if there was a dead caribou lying there. My hand reached for Jamie's elbow, and he turned. I pointed and raised an eyebrow. He leaned toward me and whispered in my ear, "The males lose their racks this time of year. That's just a rack one of those guys has dropped." His warm breath and beard scruff against my ear went straight to my groin. I quickly nodded and stepped back away from him. He continued forward. When we got about 50 feet away from them, we stopped. Some of them watched us, but some nosed through the snow, looking for food below. Jamie began slowly making his way around to the side, getting a little closer with each move he made. I stayed where I was and brought my camera up. When he was about 20 feet away from the closest caribou, I saw him reach back to move the can of bear spray clipped to his backpack over to clip on the front of his coat. He squatted down on his snowshoes and waited. I tried not to stare at his ass. The air was electric around us. I squatted down too, trying to find the angle and perspective I wanted. I stood back up and used my snowshoes to pack down the snow around me. Then I carefully lowered onto my front and propped myself up on my elbows to steady the camera. We waited. I could hear soft grunts from the herd and saw cloudy puffs coming from their noses. Steam rose faintly from their backs in the cold air. One started wandering toward Jamie, and another followed. One of them had a rack so large it made my heart speed up. Those things were amazing, but dangerous too. The one with the rack walked closer to Jamie. He stayed still and looked down where the animal's hooves sank into the snow. Jamie's elbows rested on his knees. Curled tips of his hair blew out from under the cuff of his warm hat. His pink cheeks appeared out of the top of a light blue fleece neck gaiter. He turned his face to look over at me and smiled. I snapped the shutter release button like I was trying to win a speed award. I wanted to capture every single image of this striking man in his element. As he turned his head back to watch the animal, the caribou walked up and brushed his big shoulder against Jamie's. Jamie fell back on his ass in the snow, and my heart lurched. I started to jump up and yell, but he quickly held up a hand to stop me. He gave me a clumsy okay sign with his bulky gloves before pulling himself up and getting his snowshoes under him. The caribou walked past him and turned his head back around to watch Jamie over his shoulder. He didn't look upset, and none of the others seemed bothered. Jamie was covered in snow from his hat to his ass. He made his way back over to where I was, and I could tell he was trying not to laugh too loudly. It came out in a series of snorts. I stood up and brushed myself off. Then I leaned toward him and brushed him off, taking my time around the area of his ass. He gave me a raised eyebrow and smirk. I returned it with a wink. The caribou had wandered closer to us and stood spread out all around us. It was so peaceful and rare. I wished I could go back to tell myself as a little boy that one day I would stand in the middle of a herd of wild reindeer at the base of Denali in Alaska. Jamie whispered, "Do you want to leave?" I shook my head without speaking. Instead, I snuck my arms around him, hearing the shushing sound of our outerwear gliding against each other. My face leaned in toward his, and our cold lips came together in stolen kisses, hidden by the thick white puffs of our warm breath in the cold air. No, sweetheart, I don't ever want to leave you.